Maybe. Welcome to More Than a Few Words, a marketing conversation for business owners. This is your host, Lorraine Ball, and this is another episode in my series of What Went Wrong. Sitting in my guest chair today is Robin Waite, and Robin has been a guest on the show a number of times talking about entrepreneurship and pricing, and he is a podcaster. He's got a new YouTube channel and a new book, The Fearless Business Blueprint, that's probably going to be released right about the same time as this episode. Robin, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be back again. I feel so privileged. I think this is the third time we've spoken now, which is honestly, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, and that's kind of the rule with the What Went Wrong series. Nobody gets invited to this unless they've done the other one. And I feel like we had good rhythm and there was good energy, because this series really requires people to think about being a podcast guest a little differently. You can't come in with your canned speech, because I'm going to ask you about something that didn't work out. So, Robin, what went wrong?
Well, it actually centered around an advertising campaign, which I did probably about 2 or 3 years into my coaching journey. And bearing in mind, I'm kind of a little ashamed to admit it. I'm not going to lie, because it was, I come from a marketing background. I ran an agency for sort of 12 years before I started coaching. But essentially, I kind of got on board with the whole scaling train sort of in the early years, which of coaching. 2 or 3 years, I'd been very successful, worked very hard. And then somebody introduced me to this wonderful thing called Facebook ads. And I thought, oh, this is an amazing way to sort of scale my coaching practice and get lots of leads and inquiries coming in. And it went well for a period, and then for about 8 months, and then it just went completely wrong. And I'm happy to break it down as much as I can. I'll have to probably eat some humble pie and, put my pride in the cupboard for a little bit, because I am still a little bit embarrassed by my mistake. But essentially what happened was I got to a stage where I was spending about £3,000 a month. So you're talking $4,500 a month on Facebook ads. And at the time, I probably only just sort of broken through the 6-figure barrier. So that was a heck of a lot of money, pretty much my entire marketing budget going every month. And we get 8 months into this campaign, and then all of a sudden, just the leads and the quality of leads just dried up in its entirety. I ended up running the ad campaign for a further 3 months, despite getting a few very few leads from it. And I spoke to several so-called Facebook ad experts during that time, and none of them, we're probably talking 4 or 5 experts, none of them could tell me what was going wrong with my campaign. They're essentially telling me that I'd fiddled with something and broken it, and it was no longer working, and we tried to kind of kickstart it. But I'm one of those guys that you kind of give me a project or a puzzle or something like that, and I will sit there and I will figure it out come hell or high water. And it transpired. So now having £9,000, 12 grand in the hole, of running these ads without any results, I realized what happened. And essentially, because I'd spent several years, growing my personal brand, filling up my email list, getting people into my Facebook group, again, doing a lot of the marketing stuff that everybody tells you to do, during those first 8 months was great, because I had this warm audience, and I was, surfacing ads to this warm audience, and everything was going really well. And then one day, the warm audience ran out. And I hadn't been, but it took me 3 months to figure out what happened, because I started speaking to some people who said, oh, I keep seeing your ads coming up. And this was a common theme. Like, Rob, your ads are coming up all the time. You must be doing really well. And I'm like, yeah, things are fine. Behind the scenes, absolutely bricking it. So, but the challenge there was, obviously now my budget's gone. I've got no money coming in because the ad campaign's bombed. So I had no choice but effectively to switch it off. And I did start again, but I was like, it completely transformed how I perceived short-term marketing strategies.
But, yes, that was an example of Facebook. But I think that is, when you think in the bigger picture of marketing in general, like when I first started my business, I walking out the door of my job into my business, I had half a dozen projects. They
Mm.
were all from friends and former coworkers, and it was that same thing. I got my first round of business from people who knew and loved me, and then everything dried up because I wasn't prepared to go into the larger
Yeah.
community. And the same challenge here, where nobody told you that your community was going to dry up, and had you known that, you would have, well, had you known that, what would you have done differently?
Well, I would have, and yeah, great question. I would have certainly focused on sort of that top of funnel. So bringing people in from cold into my
Mhm.
audiences, and then sort of, building trust and warming them up from there. The question was how, because when I figured this out, I was like, right, well, I need to get more people in. So what do I do? And again, the obvious choice could have been to spend more money on ads, but focusing on a cold audience. But by this time, the costs of advertising had actually escalated significantly, and
Mhm.
I couldn't maintain, my cost for the warm audiences that I got. You're talking like £1 or £2 a lead. It was like relatively cheap. Taking somebody from cold to warm and then converting them into a lead or a prospect, you're talking 10 times that. It was costing
Mhm.
15 to £20 per lead to bring through. And I simply didn't have the budget at that particular point in time. So I went through this process of like just rebuilding effectively. I was like, well, previous to this, the podcasts had worked, speaking gigs had worked, my books had worked for me. So I kind of just went back to my roots in terms of growing my personal brand,
Mhm.
and started filling up that top of funnel. And all I did then was, I knew that there was kind of a lifespan of about 6 to 12 months really to really build trust with somebody, warm them up in my groups, my email list and things like that. So I restarted the ads, but just at a very modest amount of money, just slow burn through that audience. So I managed to get the balance right between the speed I was filling up top of funnel, and then nurturing them through, and actually finally presenting them with an ad and sort of converting them from there. But yeah, a very valuable lesson. I think part of the issue was that I feel I probably didn't fully understand in great detail like the whole machine behind advertising, paid ads like that.
Mhm.
And I delegated some responsibility kind of to other people, and hoped that they knew more than I did, and that it would work out. And that's probably the bit that, where my pride, I kind of have to eat some humble pie here and just say that was a big mistake. I wish I'd taken a little bit more time to understand what it was that I was spending all my money on, for a start, and how it actually worked. And then I could have had more of a handle on, being able to see what was working and what wasn't working perhaps sooner.
Yeah. That I love and hate Facebook ads. I love and hate Google ads. And I think part of it is because I don't have the patience to really dig in, to really understand it. And so I've always outsourced it. I've always relied on the kindness of strangers or people who were smarter than me, because it just it works, and then the rules change. And I
Yeah.
think that's sometimes it is the algorithm, sometimes it's the rules, and sometimes, like in your case, you really had just burned through that audience.
Yeah. That's it. And
So, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, I've had things on the opposite end of the spectrum as well, as when things are working too well.
Mhm.
And that can equally be a mistake, because not fully understanding, so part of it really comes down to understanding your customer and the customer journey that they're going to go through before they work with you. But I had it on the opposite end of the spectrum. We touched on this during the last interview, actually, where I had that wonderful podcast interview which generated 3,000 leads for my business, like warm leads straight away. And then that also broke my business, broke the machine, and I had to rebuild it. And I think this is one of the wonderful things about marketing in general. It's a series of experiments which you have to run in your business in order to figure out how to attract and enroll clients and customers. And sometimes actually you do want things to go wrong. You do want there to be mistakes. You don't want it to break, because it forces you to get creative and figure out how to innovate and build it better the next time around. Feels very uncomfortable, like in the moment, but when you then do figure it out, I think that's the bit I love. I like problems and puzzles and things like that. So I just like to get like stuck into them. And consequently, my learning from it was when when I got that big influx of leads into my business and it kind of broke the business, I literally just pulled the rug out. I was like, right, let's break it. And then I'll have to figure out how to fix it. And it forced me to innovate in a very short space of time because I literally switched it off. But I was just going to say, finish up, it was slightly different with the Facebook ads when that went wrong, because I didn't know what had gone wrong and I didn't know how to fix it. And I think that's the challenge.
I think you hit the nail on the head that marketing is a series of experiments. It is a science in that not every science experiment works out the way you think it's going to, but there's always learning.
Definitely. Well, and it's that I think that's part of the fun of it. I think people get very attached to outcomes, though. They think they're going to spend this money on marketing or time on marketing and that it should work. And then when it doesn't, they get very upset. I think if you just accept that things are going to go wrong, then you can't be left disappointed. It's just part of the fun.
Absolutely. Well, Robin, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your misadventure with Facebook ads.
That's my pleasure. Please, I hope that that's enough for somebody to get in and fix their issue like slightly sooner than I did, not lose quite so much money.
I hope so. And I'm going to encourage anybody, if you guys are listening and you'd like to know more about what Robin is doing without waiting to click on a Facebook ad, go on and head over to Robin Waite, WAITE.com. You'll find information about his case studies, his books, where he's speaking, and also look for his newest book, Fearless Business Blueprint. And look for his YouTube channel. There'll be links in the show notes. Robin, thanks again.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And if you've enjoyed this conversation, if you'd like to find other resources for your business, head over to morethanafewwords.com. You'll find workbooks, white papers, recordings, and so much more. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.